Hi everyone. Welcome back to another week of Families in an Electronic World. We're on week 3 already. Hard to believe. I've really enjoyed the discussions that have been taking place online, and I'm looking forward to being in the discussion group that I wasn't a part of this last week. Caitlin and I are going to be switching off, so she'll move on to a different discussion group this week, and I'll get to be in the other 3. And I've really appreciated your comments. Lots of excellent, insightful thoughts about how our lives are being affected by various kinds of communication, particularly cell phones and texting and all various kinds of communication technology. So, great discussion. This next week we're going to kind of extend the topic that we've had this week, but whereas this past week we've really spent a lot of time talking about how does technology impact kind of our everyday communications with people around us, this next week we're going to look more internally. How does it affect us as individuals? How are we as people changing, or are we changing because of the advent of communication technology? So, should be another good discussion, and I'm looking forward to it. I want to talk just a little bit about the readings for this next week. And actually there are 2 readings, but there's not a video. And the theme for our discussion next week, and hence the readings for this week, really have to do with specifically with family and home. How is the advent of communication technologies, how has it affected how we interact with each other as family members? And I didn't find a good video on it this week. I'm still searching, so maybe later on in the semester I'll find it. But I do have 2 really interesting readings, I think. And I want to say a little bit about the nature of these readings first, and then tell you a bit about them. As you have noticed probably, there's no textbook for this class, and one of the reasons for that is because technology is changing so quickly that it's hard for a book to keep up. You know, the thing about a textbook is that it's written and it goes off to a publisher, and by the time the project starts to the time it actually gets out to the readers, it may take a couple of years. The process of journal articles is somewhat faster, but even there it may take a year or so before something gets out. And technology is changing so quickly that it's difficult for research that is published to be current. So I've found a couple of sources. Actually, I found the best sources for current research to be online sites that do the research and then publish it straight to the website. And there are 2 for this week. And the first one is the Pew Charitable Research Foundation. And they have a specific arm of their foundation that's focused on families and American life and technology. Some really great stuff in there. And they're constantly doing work on there, constantly publishing reports. And so the report I have for you this week from the Pew Foundation, and there will be more as the semester goes along, came out in 2012, which by most standards in social science research is pretty new research. But in this area, it's been out for a while. And so, for example, I think one of the statistics that's cited in this study is that something like, if I remember right, something like 23% of teens studied have a smartphone. Well, from the time that data was collected nearly 4 years ago until today, I'm sure that percentage has risen dramatically. In part because it's hard to find a phone anymore that's not a cell phone or not a smartphone. So you have to bear things like that in mind as we're doing this research. And I think as we're studying this research, and I think some of what you might find is that you're looking at some of this stuff and saying, wow, that seems kind of old and outdated, and it is. But the fact is, it's the newest stuff that's out there, and it just goes to show how quickly the field is changing. So let me talk a little bit about these two articles for this week. The Pew Research Foundation article is written by Amanda Leonard, and it has to do with teens and cell phones and texting. And it talks a lot about how cell phones are used by teenagers. It gives statistics about how many there are and who tends to have them and how those cell phones are used. And in particular, when it gets toward the end of the report, it talks about how it's affecting our lives and our relationships with other people. There's a lot of statistics in here, a lot of data, and some of you might look at that and say, well, I'm not really so interested in all these statistics. I really, want to be able to talk about this stuff, but I'm not so interested in the stats. And I hear what you're saying, but I also want to point out that the research sort of underscores and gives validity to a lot of the things we talk about, and in fact sometimes it differs. And sometimes when it differs, it gives us a new idea about things. So lots of stats. I think it's a pretty quick read, and I would say the report's about 30 pages. But in particular, the first 18 pages or so is important. The last section of the report deals with the methodology. You don't need to worry about that so much. But I do want you to spend some time with the first 18 pages or so of this report. The second research study is from Ericsson Labs. And Ericsson, you may have run across that name before because they are a producer of cell phones. Not so much here in the United States anymore, but they're a Swedish company, I believe, and there are a lot of Ericsson phones that are found over in Europe. But one of the things that has happened with some of these manufacturers of technology, whether it's cell phones or Microsoft or some of the companies like that, is that they have developed research arms that look not only at how are people using their equipment, but how is it affecting their social relationships with one another. And that's what this piece is. It's from 2011, so it's about 4 years old at this point, and it looks at dynamics in the home. It looks at the relationship among parents and children, mothers, fathers, husbands, wives, in terms of how various forms of technology have affected their relationships with each other. So, and that's a relatively short article. I think it's 7 or 8 pages, something like that. Also very readable, a pretty quick read, but I think you'll find it pretty interesting in terms of how technology really is kind of shifting the dynamic, how it's changing power structures in our family, how it's changing how we interact, and raising questions about how we make decisions and the kinds of rules that we have in families for cell phone and other kinds of technology use. So I want to encourage you to read both of these articles. Remember, there's a quiz on them that will be due on Monday the 9th at 8 o'clock, and then we'll launch into a discussion about it the following week. Okay, see you online.